Welcome to the deep dive. So if you're a medical graduate here in the UK and you're thinking about specialty training, you've almost certainly heard of the MSRA, that's the Multi-Specialty Recruitment Assessment.
Yeah, it's pretty much unavoidable for many routes now.
Exactly. It's become a really key hurdle for getting into a huge range of competitive fields. We're talking everything from your local GP practice all the way to, highly specialized areas like neurosurgery and ophthalmology.
A real mix.
So today, we're going to unpack what the MSRA is really all about, and, maybe more importantly, how you can actually tackle it effectively. We'll look at resources like passthemsra.com and freemsra.com.
Good plan, especially now because they're planning 2 sittings for the 2025 exams, aren't they?
That's right, 2 sittings. So understanding this whole process is more critical than ever. Let's dive right in. What exactly is this MSRA thing?
Okay, so basically, the MSRA is a computer-based assessment, and it looks at 2 main things. Firstly, it checks your medical specialty competencies. Think of those as the sort of core skills and knowledge you need for the training pathway you're applying to.
Right, the clinical stuff.
Clinical stuff, yeah. And secondly, it assesses your situational judgment, which is, well, it's all about how you'd respond to different professional scenarios you might actually encounter as a doctor.
Okay.
The whole thing is developed and delivered through a partnership. It's the work psychology group working with Pearson VUE who handle the actual test delivery.
So it's not just about what you know from textbooks, it's also about applying it, behaving professionally.
Precisely. It's assessing you as a potential doctor in the round.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned it's used widely. Just how wide are we talking? Which specialties actually use the MSRA?
Well, the list is pretty long now, and it seems to grow. In England, you're looking at general practice for ST1.
GP.
Yeah, ACCS, emergency medicine, that's acute care common STEM at CT or ST1 level. Clinical radiology ST1, core psychiatry CT1, core surgical training CT1.
Core surgery, too. Wow.
Yep. Also nuclear medicine at ST3, obstetrics and gynecology ST1, anaesthetics CT1, community sexual and reproductive health ST1, neurosurgery, and that covers ST1, ST2, and ST3 entry.
Right across the board for neuro.
And ophthalmology ST1 as well. It really shows just how significant this one exam has become across the whole medical training landscape.
Absolutely. It feels like it touches almost every major career path. And it's not just England, is it? I think you mentioned other parts of the UK.
That's right, yeah. In Northern Ireland, for instance, they use the MSRA for core surgical training CT1, clinical radiology ST1, core psychiatry training CT1, and also emergency medicine ST1.
Okay.
And then up in Scotland, it's part of the selection process for their broad-based training, the BBT program at ST1 level. So yeah, wherever you're aiming to train in the UK, there's a decent chance the MSRA will be part of your application.
Given how many specialties rely on it then, the way the score actually counts towards your application, that must vary quite a bit. It can't be the same process for getting into GP compared to, I don't know, core surgery.
That's a really, really important point. The weighting, how much the MSRA score matters, is definitely not uniform. It varies hugely.
Okay.
For some specialties, it's basically the main gatekeeper. It might decide if you even get an interview, and sometimes it heavily influences the final offer.
Right.
So take ACCS, emergency medicine, your MSRA score alone. That determines if you get invited for an interview, full stop.
Wow, okay.
Then if you get through, the final ranking is a split. 40% from your MSRA score, 60% from how you do in the interview.
So still significant, but the interview carries more weight ultimately.
Exactly. Now compare that to anesthetics. They also use the MSRA to decide who gets an interview invite. But then for the final ranking, the MSRA only contributes 15%. 15. The interview makes up the massive remaining 85%.
Okay, that's a huge difference in emphasis. So knowing that waiting for the specialty you want is absolutely vital for planning your prep.
Couldn't agree more. You need to know where to focus your energy.
What about some of the others, like radiology or psychiatry? How do they use it?
Right. For clinical radiology and also nuclear medicine, getting an interview is, well, pretty much entirely based on your MSRA score, though sometimes they operate a reserve list based on certain score thresholds.
So high stakes for getting through the door.
Very high stakes for that initial hurdle. Then, the final ranking in those fields brings in other things. It considers your MSRA performance, yes, but alongside a self-assessment score, and of course your interview.
Okay.
Now contrast that with, say, community sexual and reproductive health or core psychiatry training. For those, the MSRA is purely for shortlisting. It gets you considered for an interview, but your entire final offer That's based solely on how you perform in the interview itself.
So the MSRA opens the door, but the interview is everything once you're in the room.
You've got it. The interview seals the deal there.
It's just fascinating how differently it's applied. What about the surgical side? You mentioned core surgery uses it.
Yeah, for core surgical training, the MSRA actually contributes a relatively smaller amount to the final offer, just 10%.
Only 10%.
Only 10%. The bulk of that decision comes down to your interview performance and the evidence you provide in your application, your portfolio, essentially.
Right.
But then, swing back to general practice. For GP, the MSRA is king. Your score on this single exam solely determines your final ranking for getting a placement offer.
Wow. So if GP is your goal, the MSRA is basically everything.
It's the main event, absolutely. A massive emphasis on this one exam.
That's a really key piece of information for aspiring GPs.
Yeah.
What about some of those more niche or highly competitive routes we touched on earlier,
Right.
like neuro or O&G?
Good question. For neurosurgery, they use a combined score. It's your MSRA result plus an initial shortlisting score, and that combination decides who gets invited to interview. Then, after the interview stage, both those earlier scores, the MSRA and the shortlisting score, are factored into the final ranking.
Okay, so it contributes throughout the process there.
It does. Obstetrics and gynecology, O&G, they have quite an interesting system. If you score highly enough on the MSRA, you might actually bypass the interview stage completely.
Really. Straight to offer based on a high score.
Potentially, yes. If you do end up interviewing, then the final ranking is weighted 33.3% on your MSRA score and 66.7% on the interview. So 2/3 interview, 1/3 MSRA.
Still a decent chunk for the MSRA then.
Definitely. And finally, ophthalmology. They use the MSRA to filter candidates for interviews, but the final ranking also includes your portfolio score and results from some specific online assessments in addition to your MSRA score.
Okay, so the message is coming through loud and clear. You absolutely have to know how your specific target specialty uses this exam score. It dictates so much about your application strategy.
Couldn't have put it better myself. Know your specialty's process.
Right. Now let's shift gears slightly and talk about the exam itself. What can candidates actually expect when they sit down at the computer? What's the structure, the content?
Okay, so the MSRA is essentially made up of two distinct papers or sections. You do them one after the other, usually with a short break in between.
Two-part. Got it.
The first part is called the Professional Dilemmas paper, PD for short. This is basically a situational judgment test, an SJT. In this bit, you'll face 50 questions, 50 scenarios. They're designed to assess how you'd handle various professional situations you might encounter, focusing on things like your behavior, your ethics, communication, teamwork, those sorts of interpersonal skills.
So judging your professional instincts, effectively.
Exactly. Then the second paper is the Clinical Problem Solving, or CPS paper. This one's longer. It contains 86 questions in total.
86. Okay.
And it's a mix of question types. You'll get extended matching questions, EMQs, and also single best answer questions, SBAs. These questions are designed to test your clinical knowledge and your ability to make sound medical decisions. They cover 16 key clinical topics, areas like cardiology, respiratory medicine, pediatrics, surgery, the core stuff that's considered essential knowledge for all medical grads.
16 topics. Okay. So it's a real test of both how you'd act professionally and what you actually know clinically.
That's the idea, a holistic assessment.
Okay. So for listeners now thinking, right, I need to prepare for this, what kind of resources are actually out there? And where do websites like PassThemsAir.com fit into this picture?
Well, PassThemsAir.com is really set up to be a very comprehensive resource hub specifically for MSRA preparation. And I think what's particularly valuable about it is that it was created by doctors who have actually sat the MSRA themselves.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, and they passed it successfully, obviously. So they have that firsthand, been there, done that, understanding of what the exam really demands, what it feels like, what kind of things come up.
That kind of insider knowledge must be a huge advantage when building a resource. What specific kinds of study materials and tools do they actually offer?
They've put together a really extensive range of stuff. It includes full curriculum coverage, which is broken down by specialty where relevant, which can be super helpful for focusing your revision on the highest yield areas for your target jobs.
Tailored studying. Nice.
Yeah. They also offer over 1,100 summarized medical topics and conditions, just concise notes covering the key things you need to know. A great way to consolidate understanding, especially for the CPS paper.
Over 1,000 topics summarized. That sounds like a good way to get a handle on the sheer volume of information you need.
Yeah.
What else?
Well, for people who like active recall, and we know that's a really effective learning technique, they have a massive library of flashcards. We're talking 22,500 Anki-style flashcards.
22,000.
Yeah, it's a huge number, covering a vast amount of medical knowledge. Plus, they also have rapid active recall Q&A notes, again, around 22,500 of those, and also rapid quizzes that focus on specific medical conditions. These are great for quickly testing if you've actually grasped a topic you've just revised.
It sounds like they're really leaning into that active learning approach, which, as you say, is so effective for actually remembering things long term.
Exactly. They've also got summaries of 33 key GMC guidelines, good medical practice and all those core ethical documents.
Mhm.
Absolutely essential reading for tackling the professional dilemmas, the SJT paper.
Right, that PD paper needs specific prep.
Definitely. And then, maybe most importantly for many people, is the practice material. They offer a substantial number of mock exams. There are 10 full mock exams just for the clinical problem-solving paper, containing a total of 970 questions.
10 CPS mocks.
And another 10 mock exams specifically for the situational judgment test, the PD paper, with 500 questions in those. So that gives you a massive opportunity to simulate the real exam conditions, practice your timing, see how you handle the pressure.
That is a tremendous amount of practice material just in the mocks alone.
It really is. And beyond the mocks, they have comprehensive question banks as well. For the CPS paper, this includes banks of both the SBA format and the EMQ format questions, so you can really drill down on the specific question styles you'll face.
Practice the formats, yeah.
And for the SJT paper, their question banks cover both the ranking style questions, where you have to order options, and the pick the best 3 out of 8 format questions, so you're fully prepared for whichever type they throw at you.
Okay, covering all bases.
Yeah. If you add it all up, they offer over 4,000 CPS MSRA questions in total. That's combining their main banks and the mock papers, and over 800 SJT MSRA questions, again, combining the banks and mocks. It's a genuinely comprehensive offering.
It certainly sounds like PastMSRA.com is aiming to provide a really thorough grounding in, well, pretty much every aspect of the MSRA. Now, what about the other site we mentioned, FreeMSRA.com? What's the deal there? What kind of support might candidates find on that one?
Yeah, freemessenger.com. Well, as the name kind of suggests, it typically offers introductory or, free taster resources. It's a way for candidates to get a feel for the exam format and the type of questions they might face without any initial cost.
Like a try before you buy sort of thing.
Exactly. You might find a limited number of practice questions, maybe some basic guides to the exam structure, or perhaps just brief overviews of the key topics covered. It's often a really good starting point just to dip your toe in the water, see what the MSRA actually looks and feels like, before maybe deciding to invest in more extensive paid resources like PastMSRA.com.
That makes sense. A good way to orient yourself first. Okay, let's shift now to the actual exam day itself. Logistics. What are some key practical things candidates really need to keep in mind when the day arrives?
Okay, yeah, exam day practicalities are crucial. First off, timing. It's vital to arrive at your designated Pearson VUE testing center at least 15 minutes before your scheduled appointment time. This gives you enough buffer for the check-in process, which can take a little while.
Don't be late, basically.
Definitely don't be late. And identification. Make absolutely sure you bring a valid government-issued photo ID. It needs to match the name on your registration exactly and meet the specific requirements Pearson VUE lays out. Check their website beforehand for the specifics.
Got it. Valid ID. What about stuff you can't bring?
Ah, yes, prohibited items. Be very aware of what's not allowed in the actual testing room. This typically includes, well, the obvious things like mobile phones, any bags, coats, watches, but also any notes, textbooks, or unauthorized study materials. They're very strict about this. Lockers are usually provided.
Okay, leave everything in the locker. What about breaks?
There's usually a short scheduled break between the two papers, the PD and the CPS. It's typically around 5 minutes, enough to stretch your legs, maybe grab a quick sip of water if allowed, but not much more. One other thing to just be aware of is remote testing. Sometimes, under very specific circumstances, usually related to accessibility or maybe public health situations, remote testing via Pearson's OnVUE platform might be an option. But, and it's a big but, it comes with its own set of pretty strict technical requirements for your computer and internet connection, plus quite rigorous monitoring guidelines. You'd need to check eligibility and the rules very carefully, well in advance, if that's something you were considering or offered.
Good to know it exists, But sounds like tuning up in person at the center is still the standard way for most people.
That's generally the case, yes.
Okay. Finally then, let's just touch on how the MSRA is actually scored, and maybe distill down some final preparation tips for our listeners who might be gearing up for this.
Right, scoring. The MSRA uses what's called a normalized scoring system. Your performance on the exam ultimately places you into one of four bands, band 1 being the lowest and band 4 the highest. The really, really crucial thing to remember about scoring is this. There is no negative marking.
No penalty for wrong answers.
Absolutely none, on either paper. So, your best strategy, without a doubt, is to attempt to answer every single question. Even if you're completely unsure, make your best educated guess. Never leave a question blank.
That's a key tip. Answer everything.
Answer everything. In terms of final prep tips, consistency is key. Keep making good use of those practice question banks. Really work through the mock exams under timed conditions to get a feel for the pacing and the pressure. Use flashcards, summaries, whatever method works for you to keep reinforcing your knowledge of those core clinical principles and the GMC's ethical guidelines.
Wait.
For the professional dilemmas paper specifically, really try to immerse yourself in the scenarios. Think about the core professional values, patient safety, honesty, teamwork, and consider what the most appropriate and professional course of action would be in that situation.
Put yourself in the shoes of a good doctor.
Exactly. And finally, time management during the actual exam is critical. You've got a lot of questions to get through in a limited time, so practicing your pacing during those mock exams is really invaluable preparation. Don't get bogged down on one difficult question.
Sound advice. Consistent practice, know the principles, answer everything, and manage your time. Seems like a solid plan. It's definitely clear that the MSRA is a really significant milestone in postgraduate medical training here in the UK.
It absolutely is. And, for anyone looking for that structured, comprehensive approach to getting ready, resources like passthemsra.com, especially being created by doctors who've done it, using specialty-focused materials, they can be a really, really valuable asset in your preparation toolkit.
And freemsra.com is a good starting point, too.
And freemsra.com offering that useful introduction, yeah.
And just to reiterate, with those two sittings planned for the 2025 MSRA cycle, it really underlines the scale of this assessment and the need for solid preparation. If you do want to explore any of this in more detail or check out those specific preparation resources we've been discussing, definitely head over to the passthemsra.com website.
Yeah, it's a resource well worth checking out if you're facing the MSRA.
So as you get ready for this important assessment, remember the MSRA isn't just another exam. It really is a key gateway to your future specialty. Thanks for tuning in to this deep dive.